You know, I was listening to Pastor Sandy Adams. He's pastor of Calvary Chapel in Georgia. But he said something that really touched my heart, and it was a good reminder, and that is, who is the head of your church? It's not the pastor. It's not the elders. It's not the deacons. And we got to take that all the way back down. Not just who is the head of your church, but who's the head of your life? Who's the head of our lives? Now, we know the proper thing to say, right? We know what is the proper way that it should be, but we got to ask ourselves the reality, is he really? I mean, is he really? Do we depend upon him for everything? You see, because if we're not getting the direction from him, here's the tendency, because we are responsible for so many things in this life, our kids, our marriage, our bills, everything you can think of, we have a tendency to bring our entire thought pattern down to the day-to-day, rather than giving it to the Lord and saying, Lord, what do I do? Let's be honest. How many of us really know how to do anything? If it weren't for Google, we wouldn't know how to do anything. But my point is this, how many of us really know how to be a dad? What's the small percentage that had a father that they could model? How many wives know how to be wives? How many moms know how to be moms? How many kids know how to be kids? How do we really know how to do anything? Wouldn't it be better off to be getting the instructions from the one who made absolutely everything? You know, again, you guys have heard me say it's kind of like trying to repair a Chevy with a Ford handbook. And that's the way we go through life a lot of times. We're in this world, but we're not supposed to be of this world. So we go around with the world's handbook trying to solve all of the problems, and it doesn't work. We find out very quickly it doesn't work. We find ourselves doing a very, very poor job at the things that we have been entrusted with because we're using the wrong manual. So when he was saying that, I just began to think, is he truly Lord of my life? Is he truly Lord of my marriage? Is he truly Lord of my finances? Is he truly Lord of everything, every single thing in my life? Because you see, if I leave one of them out, if I leave any one of those things out, I'm missing the fullness of God. He doesn't have control over that. In other words, if I take any one of those areas in my life and I say, well, they're God's, but I want to tell him how to run that, then it's not really God's. It's ours. We're just giving him some control at some points and some times. All right, as we go into we're still in the Gospel of Jesus as we go through these things chronologically, but we're in the Sermon on the Mount. And my part this morning is the Beatitudes, and like I say, it's probably going to just be part 1. So we're going to be covering basically chapters 5 through 7 eventually, but this morning I'll probably be lucky to get through the first 6 verses. But this Sermon on the Mount has been hailed for a very, very long time as the sum of Jesus or anyone else's ethical teaching. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells us how to live. Now, there is a mindset, even amongst Christians, that sometimes think that I got saved, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. That's it. And to a degree, it is. But if it's not all about Jesus, I've given my life to Jesus, but I take it back from time to time. So we think, well, I don't need to live a certain way. I don't need to do a certain thing. You know, I can just be who I am. And if I want to sin a little, I can sin a little because I'm covered by the grace of God. But this gives us a way to live, the way that we are supposed to live as Christians. Yes, Christians are supposed to be different than the world. And it should be noticeable. Not something that people have to guess. I wonder if they're a Christian or not. They do the same things I do. They sin the same way I do. I wonder if they're Christians at all. It's been said that if you look at all the good advice for how to live ever uttered by any philosopher or psychiatrist or counselor, and you took all the fluff out and you kept the real essentials, you would still be left with a poor imitation of what we're about to study, the Beatitudes. The American Revolution had their Declaration of Independence. Karl Marx had his Communist Manifesto. With this message, Jesus declares what his kingdom is all about. So if we want to know what the kingdom of God is all about, or if you're struggling with how much we can sin and still get by with it, I encourage you to study the Beatitudes. We can't just take sections of scriptures and throw them out just because we might find them a little difficult. We have to find out how they all fit together. Now, this is not what the nation of Israel expected. This is not what they expected of the Messiah, because this message is not political in nature at all. And it is certainly not a how to get rich quick message. You go to any Christian bookstore, you'll find the how-to books, right? How to be this, how to do that, how to get rich, how to make money, how to write a book, how to do all these other things. And if you really boil it down, a lot of times they're directed at our ego, even in a Christian bookstore. But you know, this one kind of takes a shot at our ego. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That is a very, very good thing. This is dealing with our spiritual nature, the way a godly man or a godly woman should live. It doesn't deal with salvation necessarily, not as such, but it lays out for the follower of Jesus Christ what they're supposed to do in their daily life. How then shall we live as Christians? Let's pray. Father, again, we come to you in Jesus' name. We ask that you might teach us, help us to grow, help us to learn. And Lord, help us to evaluate. Not evaluate our parents, not evaluate our friends, not evaluate our spouse, but help us to evaluate ourselves, our walks, our relationship with you. Do you have the place that you need to have in our life and that you must have for us to be able to have the peace and the joy that comes along with our salvation? Help us, Father, to be able to listen closely and listen deeply, not to me, not to the pastor, but to the words that you've written. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Look at verses 1 and 2 of chapter 5. And seeing the multitudes, Jesus always had a multitude. Well, he did for quite a while. He had a multitude. As long as he was healing, as long as he was feeding, as long as he was supplying the needs of the people, he had a great multitude. When it came down to him really needing them, on the day that they turned Barabbas loose, they turned a murderer loose instead of Jesus, the majority of the people, even probably people that he had healed and fed, it doesn't say specifically, but I'm guessing there's some of them who at one time called themselves disciples, were probably in the crowd going, Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. But here he is. He's got great multitudes around him at this point, and he's using that as an opportunity to be able to teach them the principles of life, the things that matter the most. And seeing the disciples, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth, and he taught them, saying, and those are the Beatitudes that we're going to be taking a look at. But I want to point out a couple of things just for reference, and that is that unlike the style of today, where the pastor teacher it's customary for them to stand up here like this. In that day, it was customary for the rabbi or the pastor teacher to sit down. He would sit down and the crowd would stand up. I'd like to try that some Sunday. That would be kind of fun. All you guys stand up But he did find a place that was elevated, and so that he could see the people, and then he found a place where he could sit down and still be able to allow the people to be able to hear what he was saying. I'd also like to point out that who is he speaking to? Would you look at that verse again? I want you to look at that verse again. When he was seated, his what? His disciples came to him. So this is not necessarily a message to the unsaved, and yet you have to assume that amongst that group of people, that there were people who were still trying to figure out, tire kickers, if you will. They're trying to figure out if they really want this Christianity or not. But there's something interesting in this man, and they're there to try to hear what he's got to say. But it definitely had an impact, because later in Matthew chapter 7:28, it says this, "And so it was when Jesus ended these things that the people were astonished at his teachings." You always pray and hope that people are astonished at Jesus' teachings, not your own. That's the sad part. A lot of times as human beings, we grow up with entertainment, right? If you have little ones, or you grew up in that generation not too far ago, not too long ago, not too far back, it's all about Xbox, it's all about Nintendo, it's all about electronics, and it's all about being entertained. And we as parents will sometimes, say to the kids, "Oh, that's enough screen time," but we have our own screen times, right? Even as adults, we have our own screen time. So, my point is this: people listen to the Word of God, and I encourage you this morning to even if you don't pay any attention to me, when we get to the scriptures and we read those, pay attention to those, because that's where the strength is, and that's where the change is. The Beatitudes. Now, most call these, or at least they've heard of them, called the Beatitudes. Okay? So it's the attitudes that we should desire and the attitudes that we should possess. And I guarantee you, as we go through this, you're going to feel convicted, because I think all of us fall short at some point or another in some of these Beatitudes. So this is who we should be. The word beatitude means blessing. Now, I'm going to give you one of my favorite Psalms, and that's Psalm 1, only the first 3 verses. But in Psalm 1, verses 1 through 3, we get to see this word blessing in the way it's meant. Now, in Psalm 1, verses 1 through 3, it says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly." That's a beatitude, right? If you want it. That blessing is by not walking in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. Now, if you are not saved and you frequent bars, that verse right there hits it all. Because drunks like to give each other counsel. And usually the counsel that they give each other is dumb. Right? It's the blind leading the blind. For anybody to take counsel from a drunk or somebody who's high, that's just not smart. And yet, that's what we often get in those places. So, walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. So right there, going right out of the chute, there's a behavior modification, right? If I'm living like that and I find myself in those places, I'm probably not doing the best job that I can do with my family, with my job, with anything, because I'm receiving counsel not from God, I'm receiving it from those who are as lost as I am. And then in 2, "But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night." Now, you probably get the picture. This means a guy sitting by a little lamp, and he's like this with his hands folded, and he's in a corner somewhere, and day and night, that's not what that means. That means that you're mindful of God, that you possess God, that God's in you 24/7. And that you're wise enough to capture that knowledge and that understanding and that wisdom, rather than pushing him out and just saying, "Well, I can handle this one, God. I don't need you on this one. This is a little one. I can handle you. I'll call you into life and death stuff, but I don't really need you in this one." And meanwhile, our marriage is falling apart, our job's falling apart, our life is falling apart, and everyone around us can see it but us. We can't see it, but everyone else can. And then it says, he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. What's all the tree stuff and the fruit stuff well, even trees that bear fruit, they don't bear fruit 24/7. They don't bear it year round. But if they're by the water, if they're by the life source, they're still alive. Even though they may shed the leaves, even though there may not be any fruit, the roots are going deeper and they're still alive. They're still plugged in. So for us, if we're still plugged into the life source, there may be dry seasons in our life, but we are still growing and we are still plugged in to the Lord. And it says, whatever he does shall prosper. Now, you look at that and you go, I'm into that. I'd like everything I do to prosper. I'd like $10 to turn into 1,000 or 1,000,000. But that's not what that means. It means that your life will be one that you can lay down at night and say, it's a good day. It's a good life. Even, now here's the trick, even in the midst of difficult times. Because a lot of times we can praise him, we can give him honor, we can give him glory when things are good, right? But in the valley, not so much. In the valley, there's times when we're wondering where God is at. But I think that staying in gives us the ability to receive the blessing. Now, here, as it's used here in Psalm 1, to be blessed means to be happy. How many Christians you know that are grumbling all the time? Now, Christians grumble. We're not perfect. We grumble, but there are folks that as a Christian, they're grumbling all the time. You know why? Because their focus is on themselves. I know because I've done it. And when we get our focus on ourselves, we are going to be unhappy. If anybody had their focus on us, they would be unhappy, right? To have your focus on yourself, I don't know of a more surefire way to be unhappy than to be focused on yourself. But when you begin to take that and focus that out somewhere else, you kind of forget about that. It's kind of like having pain, being in a certain amount of pain, but then watching something that you're interested in or being involved in a good book. For a little while, that pain's gone. Just for a little while, or at least it's subdued. And it's the same thing about keeping our eyes on Jesus Christ, because ultimately we're all going to fade away anyway. So if you and I put our trust in health, if we put our trust in money, if we put our trust in the economy, if we put our trust in politics, if we put our trust anywhere, we are going to be bummed out. We are going to be depressed. So, I want to be blessed. I'm assuming you want to be blessed. So, we need to listen carefully to what he says on how to be blessed, how to be happy, how to receive that blessing from the Lord. Look at this in verse 3. Blessed or blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poor in spirit. Now, if you're like most Christians, you're going, I don't know if I completely understand what this means, to be poor in spirit. A lot of folks get this wrong. A lot of Christians get this wrong. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with self-worth. And it has nothing to do with self-loathing. I want to say that again because this is important. It has nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with self-worth, and it has nothing to do with self-loathing. It has everything to do with pride. It has everything to do with pride. Well, what do you mean, Pastor, has everything to do with pride? Pride is the inability to admit that we are spiritually bankrupt. You see, I know so many people, and some close to me, that just cannot come to the conclusion that they are pretty worthless without Jesus. They still think they have something to offer without God. Well, you know, I'm pretty smart. Yeah. well, I've done this and I've done this and I've accomplished this. When you and I get to that point, it's us and God, not just God. It's us and God. So to be poor in spirit means to admit. It means to admit that we are sinful and we are rebellious and we have nothing to offer spiritually to anyone without Jesus Christ. You see, I believe you can't get saved unless you come to that place. That's why I believe there are false conversions. Now, I'm glad I don't have to judge who's saved and who's not saved. I would never want in that game. But I believe that there are false conversions. How do I believe that there's false conversions? Because Jesus will say to some, I never knew you. Depart from me. They'll say, yeah, but didn't we cast out demons in your name? Didn't we do this in your name? Didn't we do that in your name? They go, I never knew you. You never had a part of me, and I never had a part of you. Yeah, I saw the gyrations you went through. I saw the stuff that you did, but it wasn't about me. It had nothing to do with me. You see, I believe you cannot become truly born again till you get to the place where you say, God, I am a miserable sinner. I've sinned against my family. I've sinned against people. I've sinned off and on through my whole life. I've sinned against people. Now, don't get too caught up in the word sin. If you're not familiar with church and you're not familiar with church terms, we at church have a tendency to use church language. So if you're not a Christian, if you've not been in church in a while, that sin thing might freak you out. It just means to miss the mark. And I've missed the mark many, many times in my life. And I would assume probably most of us have. But until you and I get to the place to where we say, you know what? I'm blowing it. I'm blowing it. I'm not living the way I was created to live. Until you and I get to that point, we are of no use. And I want to say, it can't be faked. It can't be faked. You might fake it for the pastor. You might fake it for your wife. I've seen this happen before when I'm dealing with couples that are engaged and want to get married. I've seen, because he wants to marry her and she's a Christian and goes, I'm not going to marry you unless you're a Christian. I've seen it faked. I've seen it faked the other direction, where the gal wants the guy and she fakes it. I've seen that faked. But you know what? It really, down to the core, can't be faked, because God knows the difference. We may be able to fool other people, but it simply cannot be faked. We either believe in Jesus Christ or we do not. And if we don't, then we are still on our own. And if we are still on our own, then you are your own God, and you still sit on your own throne. Isn't that true? I'm not a very good God. And neither are you. Neither are people. Neither are mankind. None of mankind. We don't make good gods because we are not built for it. We weren't created for it. All right. But look at the reward for admitting it, right? What does he say? What's the reward for admitting it? We inherit the kingdom of heaven. Now, the kingdom of the world, the kingdom of heaven. Which one would you want? You already live in this world. You know what it's got to offer. You know what it's got to offer. Would you rather have that, or would you rather have the kingdom of heaven? Why would we choose this world? We do all the time, don't we? It's got a lot of glitz and glamour, a lot of sparklies. We do choose the world a lot. But it's usually not a good choice. Especially, and I can say with 100%, when it comes to spiritual things, they're usually very bad choices. We'll never be blessed, we'll never be happy if we think that we can do this on our own. That's the point he's trying to make of being spiritually bankrupt. The poor in the spirit. The Lord will let us try. Some of you were like me. You tried for 20 years. You tried for 30 years. You tried for 40 years. You tried for 50 years. And then you look up and you're 50 years old or 55 years old and you're going, I'm miserable. And most likely, if you ask the 5 people closest to you, they would have told you that already. Because, when you're miserable, everybody else is miserable around you. We look at that and we go, I wonder why I'm miserable. Because we've lost the connection with God. Now, I want to pose something else to you. What would be if God is the answer, if Jesus is the answer, if he's the answer to all of the social ills, all of the political ills, all of everything, if Jesus is the answer, and he has an enemy, what do you think the enemy is going to attack the most and the hardest? The one and only thing that will change everything. He won't care about much of anything else. Is it any wonder that right now God is being pushed out of everything? Absolutely everything. Evil used to be in the dark. It used to be in the lurches, but not anymore. It's right out front. It's in office. And don't take that to mean any one office. He's in lots of offices. He's in just about everything out there. The Lord will let you try it on your own, as we all have tried, but it's certainly not the path of blessing. A couple things I want to point out before we leave this beatitude, and that is, did you notice that this blessing is placed first? I wonder why. Because if you and I don't get this, none of the other ones are going to matter. If we don't get the first blessing of becoming born again, becoming saved, by giving our life to Jesus Christ, by us getting off the throne and allowing God to be on the throne, if we neglect that one, the other ones are not going to matter. If we don't humble ourselves and admit that we're spiritually bankrupt, it's useless. Verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I have to admit, many years as a Christian, I'm going, blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn. I don't get it. I don't understand it, why God would want us to be bummed out, to mourn. But actually, the way it's used here, it's actually more than just being bummed out. And it's much more, the meaning of the word is much more than just feeling blue or being down or being bummed out. The way it's used here indicates deep, deep, deep sorrow. It's the kind of sorrow you feel when you lose someone you love. Maybe a death in the family. It's that kind of mourning. It's also the kind that you feel when you've hurt someone that you love, and there's nothing that you can do to make it right except to beg for their forgiveness. To be in that spot. Disarmed. No defense. Just falling upon the mercy of the forgiver. Now, what is this person mourning over? Let's tie it to the first one. This person is mourning over their sin. This person he's talking to the disciples. This person is mourning over their missing the mark. You see, as Christians, we still sin, right? You don't get saved and stop sinning. The only time you stop sinning is when you die. So you're still sinning. But a Christian is supposed to hurt over that. You go, well, that doesn't sound like God. Oh, yes, it does. There is nothing sweeter than a person who has realized they're wrong and they hurt over that enough to get right. That is a good thing. It's a horrible thing to get to the point where you're so callous that you hurt people and you don't care. That's a horrible thing. And yet, we can get to that place. This person tied in with the first one, and that is, we're sorry that we fall into sin. It's not something we get casual with and we begin to live with, and we begin to think, well, that's not so bad. Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. It's that person mourning over the grief and the destruction that has been caused by their separation from God. We don't realize that when we miss the mark, there's usually someone or someone's that is affected even more than we are. See, we don't sin alone. A lot of people think, well, I'm doing this in the dark, I'm doing it in private, nobody knows, nobody will ever know. Yeah, it's affecting you. And when it affects you, everybody that loves you will be affected by that in one way or another. Even if they don't know specifically what it is, your attitude and you as a person, you're going to change because of that sin. And when you change, it's going to affect everybody that loves you. But this grief, this morning, not this morning, but this morning that we're talking about here, this morning that we're talking about is not meant to be a destination. It's meant to be a path. A destination means I'm stuck there. I've arrived, I'm there, and I'm stuck. This mourning is not meant for you and I to be mourning all the time and forever over that sin. It is a path to the first one. What do I mean by that? It means it's a path that I go back. I feel guilty over this, and I go back and I apologize to my wife. It's a path. I feel guilty over what I've said to somebody and hurt them, and I go back and I say, I'm really sorry, I'm just a loudmouth, and I ask that you would forgive me. Not projecting it on them, not trying to blame them for it, but just taking ownership and saying, this is my fault. So it's not meant to keep us in a place where we're bummed out and suffer from depression for the rest of our life. It's supposed to be something we really grieve over and say, I got to get this right, because this is affecting me and it's going to affect everybody around me. I got to get this right. I've got to admit what it is. Instead of hiding behind excuses, I got to admit this for what it is, and that is I'm an imperfect person. Verse 5. Let's go to chapter 5, verse 5. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I got to say once again, guys, there's a lot of us that miss this. We get this wrong too. A lot of Christians get this wrong. Now, here's the thing. Many Christians have adopted the lamb, but they gave the lion up for adoption. Let me say it again. Many Christians have adopted the lamb, but they've thrown the lion out and they've given him up for adoption. Well, what do I mean by that? It is true that Jesus is the lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world, but he is also the lion from the tribe of Judah. There are so many people who believe that a Christian must be passive. They believe that he should be Casper Milquetoast. They believe that he should acquiesce to everything, never stand up for anything. Guys, that's not what this scripture means. It doesn't mean that Christians are to have no backbone. In fact, it means just the opposite. When did we get to the point where we felt, or we took on the world's viewpoint of us, that if we ever stand up for anything, we're not Christian? Where did we get that? That's not what Jesus did. Jesus stood up for what was right. He cleared the temple when it needed to be cleared. And I guarantee you there were probably people going, look at that, look at him, look at what he is doing, look at that. He's supposed to be a Christian. He's supposed to be talking peace and love and joy and all that stuff. And look at what he did. He just cleared out the temple. He didn't let that stop him. He knew what his mission was, and he did what he was supposed to do. To be meek means to have power under control. Guys, we have the power of the universe on our side. We have Jesus Christ on our side. But be careful how you use it. It's supposed to be used for righteousness' sake. I love the way Pastor David Guzik says it. He said, it's like a strong stallion that has trained to do the job instead of running wild. Now put Jesus in there. Jesus is that stallion doing what he was supposed to do instead of just running wild. Facing his own death, he said to the Father, he says, Father, not my will, but yours be done. That's power under control. You know what's not power under control? When I don't want to do this. This hurts. This is no good. You're being mean to me, and I'm achy, and I don't want to have to. I'm in a bad mood today, and I just don't feel right. And that's not power under control. That's no power at all. But Jesus had power under control. That strong stallion is doing what was necessary instead of what was easy. We often just do what's easy, right? That's our nature. We try to make our life as easy as it can possibly be. But you know what? Doing what God wants us to do is not always an easy thing. Sometimes it's a very difficult thing to do what God has asked us to do. And it's at that point in time, we got to put aside what we want and how we feel, and either, if God wants us to keep our mouth shut, just keep our mouth shut. That's hard to do, isn't it, when you want to take up arms and make things right with your fists or your mouth. So being meek doesn't mean to be a sissy. Being weak doesn't mean to be without power. Being meek. Being meek means that you know what power you have. You know you have the ability to use it. But you keep that under control to exemplify the life of Jesus Christ. He's given us the power to not sin, not given us the power to sin and then ask for forgiveness. You hear people say, well, I'll do it first and then ask for forgiveness. No, wouldn't it be better if we just didn't do it? All right. Jesus already owns absolutely everything, and as his kids, we have inherited that. We have inherited that. We've inherited everything that is his, and he's already won. So guys, you've already won. Jesus is your father. If you got number one here, Jesus is your father. You've accepted him as your Lord and Savior. You've inherited everything that is his. So if you are a Christian, you've already won the battle. All you've got to do is abide in it. You don't have to take it out of God's hands and fight it for yourself, because you're going to lose. You can just leave it in his hands and rest in that. And I'll tell you what, it makes life so much sweeter. It makes life so much better to know that you're not in charge of everything. That you have a father that loves you more than you love yourself, and that he'll take care of those things. And you can trust him. You can rest in that. That's a sweet way to be able to live. Okay. If we don't love Jesus, we're not going to find happiness. We're not going to find blessedness. If we don't find that spiritual poverty, we're never going to have the meekness that we need to have in the Lord. Let's move to verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Hunger and thirst for righteousness. Boy, I had to stop with this one. Do I hunger and thirst for righteousness? Now, some of you right now, you're you're getting hungry and you're thirsty. But it's probably for food, because it's getting close to lunchtime. We're very, very aware of what that means. And people often hunger for things like power, authority, success, comfort, but very few people really hunger for righteousness. And I have to ask myself as a Christian, do I hunger for righteousness? Jesus, remember when he was at the woman with Samaria, the woman at Samaria, and he was the woman at the well, if you will, and he had stopped there, and he sent the guys off to get some food, and they came back. And in John chapter 4, verse 31, it says, in the meantime, his disciples, they came back, and they urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat, because they had come back with the food. And he said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. What? Why'd you send us for food? If you've got food, if you've got that packed away somewhere, why did you send us in for food? And he says, therefore, the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him anything to eat? And Jesus said to them, my food is what? My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. My food is to do my Father's will. My food is to do God's will. I get nourishment from doing the will of God. That's what he's talking about. Those of us that hunger and thirst for righteousness, we're going to be blessed by that. Now, most of us get hungry at least 3 times a day. Can you imagine if it was the same with wanting to be right with God? That at a minimum, at least 3 times a day, at a minimum, and I'm being gracious here, but at a minimum, let's say 3 times a day, we got hunger pains for Jesus. Right? You know what the hunger pain, well, in America, we don't know what hunger pains are, but you know what I mean, when your stomach's kind of growling and talking to everything else in there, and it's like, I'm hungry, feed me. And you're going like, you're getting irritable, you're getting hangry, right? Because your anger is starting to come in because you're getting hungry. You know what that kind of hunger is? Wouldn't it be awesome if you had that same clock at least a minimum of 3 times a day where you're going, I got to have God, got to have God, got to have God. Give me a Bible, give me some room. I need to find some time with God. You imagine how much that would change our lives? See, that's kind of what he's talking about. Intense desire for God. So many times we desire righteousness because it's a momentary ease of a guilty conscience. There's people who go to church on Sundays or even midweek, mostly on Sundays, from time to time just to ease a guilty conscience. You know, that little bit of Jesus stuff, that's okay. Just don't get fanatic about it. You know, a little bit of Jesus, mix it in with everything else, you know, be a real balanced person, make you a nice guy, you know, that's okay. That's all right. But don't really fall for it all. Don't really become born again. Don't be like one of those born agains, one of those Christians who really believes in all of that stuff. But you see, that's only a momentary easing of our conscience. That's not a hunger and a thirst for righteousness. Not at all. And what does it say? If we desire that, what will happen? What's the reward of that? We will be filled. We will be filled. Now, in America, I'm not so sure we completely understand what it's like to be filled. We eat a lot of belly food, but not much brain food. What do I mean by that? Some of you already know that if you consume a lot of sugar and a lot of carbs, that's belly food. Now, bear with me here. Some of us, either now or in the past or in the future, we're not full until we can't eat anymore. And I'm talking about until you're so full you have to push away from the table, undo your belt buckle, and gasp for air. But there's always room for ice cream to fall in the cracks. Right? That's the American way. That's belly food. And you know what? Carbs do not send the signal to your brain that you're full. It doesn't send the signal to your brain that you're full. That's why we have to eat so much. Till we look down at the buttons are popping and we go, oh, whoa. But when you and I eat the way we're supposed to, it sends the signal to the brain to say, hey, you're full now. And you find yourself, you eat a lot less because of that. So, it says that they shall be filled. It's not the belly food, it's the spiritual food. It's the brain food. When you and I are doing these things, we're seeking God, we're desiring righteousness, we're going to be filled up. What does that mean? We're going to be filled up. We're going to be grateful for things in life. I'm not saying that life doesn't get hard, and I'm not saying that some things in life are almost unbearable. But you can still be filled. And I've seen it. I've stood at the deathbed of people. I had one man asking me to do his funeral. He woke up. Daughter asked me to go see him. Says he's been in a coma. He hasn't talked for days. I went down. I said something. He woke up. He talked. He told me about his military career. We talked for hours. He asked me if I would do the funeral. First time I ever had anybody ask me to do the funeral right there, right? And I considered it a great honor and assured him that I would. I went home and the daughter called me and said, well, how was Dad? And I says, he told me about, she goes, what? And I said, yeah, he told me all about his military career. I told her exactly the dates and the times that he had given me the things. She goes, he hasn't talked to anybody in like 5 or 6 days. And we didn't expect him to ever say anything else. And he didn't speak to anybody else after that. But he told me all of these things. When you're standing beside the deathbed of someone, and it's someone very dear and close to you, that hurts. And I'm not trying to say that we won't go through those things. This is not our world. This is not our home. We live in it, but this is not really our home. You're going to have things that hurt you. But the thing of it is, if you get the other things in order, you'll still have that peace that passes all understanding, even in the middle of all of that hurt. That's why the Bible says we grieve, but not the way other people grieve. Because we have hope. We know that this life is not the end. That this life is going to end, but that's just the beginning of being able to be with the Lord. Okay, I'm going to close this up, and I'm going to close it with James chapter 4, if you would turn there, please. We just don't have time to do all of them this morning. You see, the world is always hungry and never full. If we live in the world, we'll always be hungry and never full. Nothing will ever really satisfy us. In James chapter 4, starting in verse 1, he says, where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desire or your pleasure for pleasure that war against your body? You lust and you do not have. You murder and you covet and you cannot obtain. You fight and you war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. And you do not ask. You ask, but you do not receive because you ask amiss or incorrectly, that you may spend it upon your own pleasures. Adulterers and adulteresses. What's that all about? He's saying, love me instead. Love me instead. I'll satisfy. I'll give you the desires of your heart. I'll give you the food that makes you feel full and be full. Not belly food, but spiritual food. The stuff that you really need to be happy, not all of the other stuff. He gives us some of the other stuff just out of the goodness of his heart. But most of that stuff perishes anyway. And he calls people adulterers and adulteresses because that's another lover. Jesus doesn't want to compete with another lover. He doesn't want to compete with the world. He wants us to be dedicated to him so that we depend upon him. He says, do you not know that friendship with the world is being an enemy of God's? Wow, guys. Well, the world's not so bad. It's got a lot to offer. No, it doesn't. Not much at all. The beautiful things that God's created, yes. But guys, we've exploited that and ruined half of that already. Yeah, let me go on. Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God's. Do you think that the scripture says in vain, the Spirit who dwells in us yearns jealously, but he gives more grace. Therefore God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And I got to say this before we go. Do you feel like you're just running backwards in life? Do you feel like you take one step forward and two back? Let's be honest, there's a lot of people who feel that way. They feel that they never get ahead. They feel like there's this force against them, that no matter what they try to do, they're just not getting it right. Well, guys, that's true. That's what he's trying to say. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. He does that out of love so that you and I will finally come to a place and say, I can't do this. So that he can say, I told you so. Why don't you just let me do it? I've already done it. I'll take care of you. Therefore, submit to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you who missed the mark. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom, but not a destination, only a path. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will what? He will lift you up.